An arrogant couple didn't think twice before scorning the food delivery man, treating him with humiliation and contempt at their doorstep. But what they didn't know is that the next day this same man would return, not with a bag in his hands, but with documents that revealed a shocking truth. He was the new owner of the building where they lived. Before continuing, please like and subscribe to the channel. Here you will find stories that prove how life takes unexpected turns. It was a night like so many others in the city. The streets were already immersed in the rhythm of the night, with scattered honking horns, the hurried footsteps of workers returning home, and the smell of food wafting from the doors of restaurants and cafes. The building in question, modern and well lit, stood on one of the busiest avenues. The glass facade reflected the streetlights, and the entrance hall featured marble floors, impeccably arranged potted plants, and an attentive doorman who discreetly greeted each resident. That night the scene was quiet. Some residents walked through the lobby clutching grocery bags. Others returned from the gym with headphones on, oblivious to what was happening around them. It was a place of routine, of repetition, where each night seemed the same as the last. It was into this scenario that a food delivery driver arrived. He wore a simple but clean uniform and carried a cooler bag on his back, where an order still held its warmth. His face betrayed the weariness of someone who had already made dozens of deliveries that night, but also conveyed a particular serenity. He was one of those workers invisible to many, but essential to all. He climbed the small staircase to the glass door, greeted the doorman with a polite wave, and waited. The delivery routine was always the same. Enter, go upstairs, deliver, leave. Nothing particularly remarkable. But that night, the story that would unfold would be different. As he waited for clearance to go upstairs, he looked around. The hall was spacious, filled with luxurious details that contrasted with the simplicity of his own life. There was no envy in his gaze, but rather a silent reflection. So many people are so caught up in appearance, forgetting that life is made of deeper values. Outside, the night wind blew lightly, but inside the building the mood was about to change. The delivery man didn't know it, but this seemingly ordinary delivery would be the beginning of a memorable encounter. Fate, silent and patient, had already set the scene, and it was at that moment, as he was adjusting the bag in his hands, that the elevator door opened, revealing the couple who would completely change the course of the night. The elevator opened like a stage curtain, and from within, a strong perfume emerged, the kind that announces its presence before the person arrives. Soon after, her stiletto heel clicked against the marble. Behind her, the discreet glint of an expensive wristwatch reflected the light from the chandelier. They were a studied portrait. She, in a figure-hugging designer signature dress. He, an impeccable shirt, straight belt, and a smile practiced for photographs. A couple who seemed to have been molded to enchant a building's lobby, and who, by so much staging their own image, forgot to fit in with humanity. The first thing they did wasn't greet the doorman. They looked at themselves in the glass door, adjusting small details as if the mirror owed them obedience. She lifted her chin a millimeter. He ran a hand through his hair, confirming nothing was out of place. Only then did they notice the delivery man standing there, the cooler bag discreetly resting against his leg. "Good evening," said the doorman, giving him a professional smile. "Uh-huh," she replied, not moving her lips enough to turn sound into kindness. He nodded with a barely audible, "Good," already pulling his cell phone out of his pocket as a shield. The woman's eyes traveled down the delivery man's uniform, lingering on his worn sneakers, the cuffs of his pants marked by the day's work, and the hands firmly gripping the backpack strap. Her gaze, however, didn't stop at what she saw. It rested on the ready judgment she'd always carried. She raised her eyebrows in a tiny gesture that said more than any sentence, "Does not belong." "Request for 902, Mrs. Marina," the doorman informed kindly, trying to facilitate the flow. "Ah," she said, as if discovering dust on a sideboard. "Delivery has to go up through the service garage. Didn't someone explain that?" The delivery man politely arranged the bag. "I was told at the reception that I could go up in the main elevator, ma'am." The resident authorized it. She laughed shortly. Residents can authorize whatever they want, but the building rules don't change because of... And the rest of the sentence hung in the air, amputated by his own disdain. He, standing next to him, pointed with his chin to the access panel, as if offering instructions to a child. Use the side entrance, brother. That's what it's for. This hall always smells like food. It's unpleasant. The word unpleasant hung suspended, glued to the high ceiling like a fly trapped on glass. The delivery man took a deep breath, not returning the barb. He opened the app to confirm the floor, as if avoiding a fabricated argument. The doorman, caught between protocol and common sense, tried to resolve the matter. The resident asked, "For urgency, Mrs. Marina, I can release the climb now. It'll only take 2 minutes." 2 minutes becomes a habit, she cut in dryly. Today it's 2, tomorrow it's 10, and before you know it, it's become a bus station. He chuckled, easing his own impatience into irony. Go on, love. Otherwise, soon there will be a line of motorbikes parking in the garden. The comparison provoked a heavy silence. The garden was the condominium's darling. Transforming it into a caricature of chaos was the perfect joke for those who confuse order with exclusion. I don't want to make things difficult, ma'am, the delivery man said, keeping his tone low. I just need to deliver it while it's still hot. She arched her eyebrows again, the same choreography as before. It's your problem if you cool off, not mine. The rules are clear. His watch vibrated with a notification, and for a second, arrogance was replaced by haste. Impatiently, he tapped his card on the reader to open the automatic door, but still found time for a piece of advice no one asked for. Learn. Those who respect the rules go further. The doorman looked away, not wanting to watch the morality play in reverse. A neighbor crossed the hall at that moment, carrying a scented garbage bag, and half completed the scene. The delivery man's back, the doorman's tense expression, the couple armed with convictions. The neighbor hesitated, perhaps out of fear of friction, perhaps because she knew their temperaments, limiting herself to a timid good night that died before it was born. The elevator door was already closing behind the couple, who ascended, enveloped in gilded mirrors, satisfied with having defended a principle that only served to keep others out. The hall was left in a vacuum for seconds. The sound of the air conditioning compressor was the first to return. The doorman cleared his throat gently. I apologize for the situation. If you want, I can call 902 and explain the delay. No need, boss. The delivery man gave a quick, protective smile. I'll find a way. The hand gripping the bag's handle tightened, not out of anger, but to keep from dropping the part of the day that still needed to be delivered. Hot food, timely delivery, respect for those who paid for it. He turned toward the service entrance and crossed the windowless hallway, where the flooring had changed from marble to cold ceramic, and the yellow lighting to white fluorescent. The walls showed signs of recent maintenance. The air was filled with the scent of cleaning products that never make it into the condo's photos. While waiting for the service elevator, he overheard the muffled conversation of 2 maintenance workers. They were talking about the inspection that would take place the next day, the big-time visit from the administrator, the promise of replacing the intercoms and overhauling the remote concierge. The delivery man recorded it without showing any curiosity. He was practiced at listening to the world around. Corners. Big changes always start this way, through cracks. The elevator arrived with a discreet jolt, the doors creaking slightly. He stepped in, pressed 9, and felt the familiar jolt of the cabin that works more than it rests. He glanced at his own reflection in the brushed steel, a simple uniform, attentive eyes, a hint of fatigue that good manners cannot erase. He smiled slightly. There was a tranquility there that didn't ask permission to exist. On the 9th floor, the hallway was quiet, with plush carpets in front of the doors and polished bronze numbers. The scent of imported diffuser hung in the air, a sign of status. He knocked on door 902, and the resident, not the woman from the lobby but another, accepted the delivery with a sincere thank you and a fair tip. Within seconds, normality returned, as if the previous scene were just a hiccup in the night. Back in the elevator, he took a deep breath and let his mind settle. There was no time for inner drama. There were more. Requests, more distances, more stares. But deep in his chest, something had settled. Not resentment, not revenge. Just the calm certainty that the world revolves around itself and, sometimes, stops right at the door of those who need to learn. On the ground floor, the doorman raised the service entrance gate and, before the delivery man left, ventured, "People like that, life teaches." "She does," he confirmed with a nod. "In her own time." The motorcycle's engine purred low on the sidewalk, cutting through the night with the discretion of someone who knows the way. The building's lights remained imposing, as if nothing could touch them. And yet, history had already touched there. Right where the front door and the service door meet, revealing, without saying anything, who we choose to be when we think no one is looking. Above, two silhouettes moved behind a window. The couple clinked glasses, laughing at something on their cell phones. They laughed at themselves, unknowingly. They laughed at a world that, the next morning, would present its bill with interest of reality. Because the night still belonged to the building, the next day did not. The elevator had barely closed behind the couple, but the echo of their arrogance still lingered in the lobby. The doorman tried to hide his discomfort, straightening papers on the counter and avoiding looking at the delivery man, who was already heading toward the service entrance. But fate, ever patient, seemed intent on prolonging the scene. The passenger elevator descended again a few minutes later, and the doors opened again. The couple reappeared. "I forgot my cell phone in the car," she said, fidgeting with her hair impatiently. "And of course, this building just today has a line of bikers." The delivery man was still waiting for permission to go up with another order, bag in hand. He said nothing, simply maintaining the discreet posture of someone who knows that silence is sometimes the only armor. But for the couple, silence was interpreted as weakness. "Look," the man said, approaching with slow, measured steps. "You're disrupting the flow of traffic here in the lobby. This space is for residents and visitors, not for delivery drivers to stand around as decoration." The doorman tried to intervene. "Sir, he's waiting for 702 to be released. Just a moment." "It doesn't matter," the man snapped, deliberately raising his voice so it echoed off the marble. "I pay a lot to live here. I don't want my wife having to share space with people who should be in the service garage." The sentence reverberated through the hall like a stone thrown into calm water. A neighbor, crossing the room with shopping bags in hand, stopped in her tracks, taken aback by the tone. Another resident waiting for the elevator raised his eyebrows and looked away, pretending not to hear, but unable to hide his discomfort. The woman approached her husband and added with a cold smile, "That's why I say the building needs stricter rules. Today there's one. Tomorrow there are 10 delivery men standing in here, dirtying the floor, talking loudly on the phone." The delivery man tightened his grip on the bag's handle, not out of anger, but to maintain the dignity he insisted on maintaining. He looked at the couple and said in a low, polite tone, "I'm just doing my job. I'll be out of the way soon." But the attempt to remain calm only inflamed the arrogance further. "Work?" The man laughed, loud, dry, almost mocking. "That's not work. It's an underpaid favor. You should be grateful for being allowed into a building like this." The woman added, "Yes, if it were up to me, those kinds of people wouldn't even get past the gate." The doorman swallowed, clearly uncomfortable. He knew the delivery man, not by name but by face. He'd been there before, always polite, always respectful, and now, seeing him treated as if he were invisible, hurt. "Gentlemen, please." The doorman tried, but was ignored. The delivery man, still calm, took a deep breath and replied, "Everyone deserves respect, madam." It was simple, but enough to transform the silence into reality. The neighbor who had been watching before let out a barely audible, "That's right." The man snorted ironically. "Respect? You should first learn to respect where your place is." The word place came out thick, heavy, designed to diminish. It struck not only the delivery man, but everyone within earshot. The room was plunged into embarrassment. The couple, satisfied with the impact, turned their backs and walked toward the automatic door. Before leaving, he still threw out the final phrase, as if it were a signature of his arrogance. "Next time, learn. People like you don't walk the same path as us." The glass in the door closed behind them, muffling the sound of distant laughter. The hall, however, remained heavy, as if the words still clung to the air. The doorman sighed and shook his head, muttering to the delivery man, "Don't worry, friend. They're always like that." The delivery man only smiled slightly, but there was something in his eyes that no one noticed. A quiet gleam, not of anger, but of certainty. He knew that life always finds a way to give back what is given. And that night, the seed of change had already been planted. The hall remained empty for a few seconds after the couple left, as if the silence wanted to digest the cruelty of the words hurled within. The doorman adjusted his tie, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing more. The neighbor who had witnessed part of the scene hurried upstairs, avoiding prolonging the embarrassment. Only the delivery man, his cooler bag, and the feeling that the air had grown heavier remained. He didn't react. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, didn't let his anger show. He simply stood, holding tightly to the handle of his bag, breathing deeply to control the avalanche churning inside him. The humiliation wasn't new. He'd experienced similar situations before. On different streets, in different buildings, with different faces, but always with the same arrogance. And yet, each time hurt as much as the first. "Everyone deserves respect," he had said minutes earlier. A simple, almost banal phrase. But in that context, it was the only weapon he had. Not to hurt, but to stay on his feet. While the couple's words still echoed in his mind, he repeated to himself, "I am not lesser. I am not invisible. I am worthy." The doorman broke the silence, in a timid attempt to lighten the mood. "Sorry, see, they're like that with everyone, even me. If it's not you, it's the cleaning lady, the janitor. They're never satisfied." The delivery man smiled at the corner of his mouth, a short smile, more to reassure the other than himself. "Don't worry, friend. Everyone shows what they have inside." He adjusted the bag on his shoulders. "I'm just doing my job." And it was true. But inside, as the service elevator whisked him to the next floor, he reflected. He remembered his own journey to this point, the years of effort, the days he'd had to balance studies and hard work, the projects he'd built with sweat, the risks he'd taken to achieve what he had today. The simple uniform didn't tell the whole story. Behind it, there was someone carrying dreams, achievements, and responsibilities. As he stared at his reflection in the elevator's brushed steel, he thought about how the world loves to judge by what it immediately sees: clothes, positions, appearances. No one imagines the stories hidden behind each face. He took another deep breath and smiled to himself, almost as if secretly, they will learn. There was no desire for revenge in his heart. It wasn't about humiliating someone back, nor about retaliating. It was simply the quiet confidence that life always takes turns, and when it does, it doesn't ask for permission. When she delivered the package to the apartment she'd indicated, she received a sincere thank you from a resident who even offered her a small bottle of water. The contrast was almost painful. There was proof that kindness didn't depend on social standing, but on character. On the way down, he passed the doorman again, who still seemed uncomfortable with the scene. The man said to him quietly, "You know, I think one day they'll still fall off their heels. The world doesn't spin on its own." The delivery man just nodded, keeping the comment to himself as if he were keeping an obvious truth. "The world does turn," he replied, "and sometimes it turns faster than we imagine." He mounted his motorcycle and headed to his next delivery. The night was still only half over, and there were many orders to fulfill. But inside him, something had changed. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't resentment. It was simply the certainty that the encounter that night hadn't been in vain, because although the couple laughed and turned their backs, they still didn't know it. Fate had already placed the pieces on the board. And the next day, the game would be different. The elevator glided to the 9th floor, the couple seemingly silent, but not peaceful. She adjusted her bag strap repeatedly, as if she still felt the uncomfortable presence of the delivery man's cooler bag on her fingers. He fiddled with his watch, checking notifications that didn't exist, just to avoid staring at his reflection in the elevator mirror. The awkwardness that should have befallen them was distorted into even more arrogance. As soon as the door opened, they walked down the carpeted hallway to the apartment. Upon entering, they were greeted by the scent of scented candles and the comfortable silence of the luxurious space they called home. Soft rugs, imported furniture, signed paintings. It was the perfect setting to nurture their self-image, superior, different, far removed from the reality of ordinary people. "Did you see the audacity?" she began, dropping her bag on the sofa with a thud. "Talking to me as if I were an equal. These delivery guys think that because everyone depends on them, they have the right to demand respect." He poured 2 glasses of wine, handed one to her, and replied with a dry laugh. "The doorman is also a problem. He lets anyone in through the common area. We need to talk about it at the next condo meeting. This building is getting too popular." "Exactly," she raised her glass. "What do you mean? These people should be grateful for their jobs, not put themselves on the same level as those who pay them." He took a sip and added, his voice thick with contempt, "And he still has the nerve to talk about respect. Respect is earned, not demanded. And he's no one to talk about it." Their laughter echoed through the apartment, muffled by the concrete and glass walls. For them, the scene had already been resolved, swept under the rug of arrogance. There was no room for reflection, only ego-boosting. While dining on a fine meal, ironically also delivered by a delivery service but from a different restaurant, they commented on how the city was lost and how the world seemed increasingly upside down. To them, the simple act of someone demanding respect was a sign that natural hierarchies were being challenged. "This building needs real owners," she said, picking at her plate impatiently. "People who know how to enforce rules, not who let just anyone invade their space." He smiled, pleased with the phrase, without imagining that it sounded like a prophecy. "Yeah, but as long as, we're here, at least on our floor, things will be our way." Their arrogance wasn't just in their words. It was in their gestures, in the way they looked out the window at the street below, where dozens of motorcycles passed by, each with a delivery driver at the helm. To them, they weren't people. They were noises, disposable cogs in a machine that existed solely to serve them. The evening continued with occasional laughter, snide comments about neighbors, criticism of the doorman, and even a mocking comparison. "If you let me, the delivery guy will soon want to live here," she said, laughing. "That's all we need," he replied, laughing along. "Having a neighbor with a cooler bag." And they laughed again, confident that the world would never show them otherwise. But outside, on the sidewalk lit by streetlights and storefronts, the delivery man continued on his way in silence. He hadn't heard those last words, but he didn't need to. Life had already heard them for him, and, as always, it wouldn't let them go unanswered. The couple fell asleep late that night, satisfied with the belief that they had reaffirmed their position as superiors. But what they didn't know was that while they slept under expensive sheets, a document had already been notarized, a signature had already been made, a contract had already changed hands, and the next morning the delivery man would return, not with a bag, but with a truth that would change everything. The motorcycle engine roared softly as, the delivery man left the building sidewalk behind. The night was cold, the wind bit his face, and the smell of the city mingled with fuel, fried food, and distant sea air. For anyone else, that delivery would be just another one on the apps list. But for him, it had a different aftertaste. Not the bitter taste of humiliation, but a strange sensation, almost like a reminder. The world had recorded what happened. On the way to the next delivery, car headlights streaked the avenue, and each stoplight seemed like a pause for thought. He remembered the words the couple had spoken. "People like you shouldn't be here." It hurt, of course. There was no way it wouldn't hurt. But inside him, instead of anger, a curious serenity was born. It was as if part of him was saying, "Don't worry. Tomorrow is another day." He arrived at another address, delivered another meal, and received a warm thank you from a simple family sharing the dinner table. The contrast made him smile quietly. He always noticed this. The more humble a person, the more respect they offered. The more arrogant, the more hollow they appeared. As he drove through the streets lit by interspersed street lights, he remembered his own journey. He hadn't always been a delivery man. Before that, he had studied, worked in various fields, and taken risks in small businesses. He had known failures, but he had also known triumphs, and at that moment, he secretly carried an even greater victory, the signed contract that made him the owner of the building where the couple lived. He didn't need to tell anyone. The document tucked away in his backpack, inside a black folder, said it all. Soon, the residents would be officially notified by the administrator. But fate seemed to have hastened events. That unexpected delivery that night had placed the pieces on the board in the perfect position. At the traffic light, waiting for the green light, he found himself thinking, if they had known, if they had treated anyone with respect, this revelation would have been just a happy coincidence. But now it will be a lesson. The light turned green. He accelerated slowly, allowing the wind to carry away the last spark of discomfort. There was no room in his heart for resentment. What there was a calm certainty. Life will exact its toll sooner or later, and it will exact its toll in the same tone it received. He delivered the last orders of the night, closed the app, and headed home. The small apartment he lived in by choice, not necessity, welcomed him with a comforting silence. He parked his motorcycle in the garage, went upstairs, and before bed, opened the folder containing his documents again. His name shone in firm letters, beneath an official seal, owner of the residential building. He took a deep breath. He smiled, this time unhurriedly. Tomorrow would be a different day, not because he would get revenge, but because the truth would come out naturally. Life had already set the stage. He lay down, and, before closing his eyes, he remembered the couple's gaze, the arrogance, the contempt, the laughter. He held no hatred. He simply thought, they will learn. And so, lulled by the certainty that time always reveals who is truly valuable, he fell asleep in peace. Outside, the city continued its nocturnal rhythm, but one detail went unnoticed by everyone. Destiny was already on its way, and the next day it would knock on the couple's door. The sun hadn't even fully risen when the building began to wake up differently. The morning doorman arrived 10 minutes early, straightened his uniform, wiped down the reception desk, and arranged the leaves on the side table with unusual care. Even he couldn't explain why. It was as if the place was demanding order, as if sensing an important visitor. At 7:12 a.m., the intercom rang louder than usual. A maintenance company announced it would arrive for a general inspection of elevators and intercoms. At 7:27 a.m., another ring. The property manager confirmed her presence in the lobby around 10 a.m. A brief meeting with interested residents. The doorman jotted everything down in a blue-covered notebook, the same one where he kept minor news and major mishaps. He wrote, 10 a.m., Administrator Plus presentation. Subscript, a question mark. The condominium's WhatsApp group exploded like a pot on high heat. Does anyone know what this is about? Change of rules? Are you going to change the remote concierge? I hope they fix the social elevator. A neighbor from 402 said she saw, the night before, confusion with a delivery person, and another responded with an eyes emoji. I also saw some ugly faces. Within minutes, the digital noise became a real rumor. The building breathed in anticipation. In the lobby, the janitor instructed 2 maintenance men to check the glass turnstiles, while a third tested the intercom. The scent of citrus filled the lobby. The floor gleamed a little brighter. Every detail felt like a rehearsal for a presentation. The doorman, more attentive than usual, reviewed the mailing list and sorted envelopes bearing the management company's logo, still sealed, but looking like news. At 8:15 a.m., the couple appeared. She came down in a light-colored sweatshirt and sunglasses, he with the same performative haste as always. They approached the counter with the pace of someone taking charge of everything. "What's all this commotion about?" she asked, as if the building owed her an explanation. "Inspection and meeting. With the administrator, Mrs. Marina," the doorman replied politely. "They said it's quick." She pursed her lips. "I hope it's to bring order. Just yesterday I commented on the flow of delivery people in here." He nodded, satisfied with the script he envisioned. Finally, someone will actually listen to the residents. They went upstairs. In the elevator, they passed neighbors who spoke softly, whispering messages. New owner, change of management, updated rules. The word honor stuck in the couple's ears like a song with a promised chorus. She smiled. If a new owner comes in, even better. Reliable people who understand the value of the property. And don't turn a blind eye to the mess, he added, already mentally drawing up a list of demands. At 9 a.m., the building had a different pulse. 2 people in suits entered with black briefcases. They greeted the doorman by name, checked notes, and asked for the lobby to be cleared for a few minutes around 10 a.m. The janitor lined up the seats in a semicircle, as if the hall were to become an auditorium. A side table was set up next to the passenger elevator. On it lay a bottle of water, glasses, and a document holder with an elastic band. Residents began to get out. The lady from 203, with her little dog in her arms, said she'd stay just a little while. The guy from 1101 brought coffee in a thermos. The girl from 702, the one with the urgent request the night before, sat discreetly in the back, curious. There were whispers that, so hushed, sounded like wind. They say the new owner wants to speak in person. Who bought the entire building? That will renovate the gatehouse with each hypothesis. More necks craned, more eyes watched the automatic door. At 9:47 a.m., the intercom rang with a tone the doorman recognized as important visit. He answered, heard a few words, and nodded twice, as if receiving confirmation of a tour. Before anyone could ask, he said, the administrator asks that anyone who can be present in the lobby in 5 minutes. It'll be brief. The couple arrived at the same moment. They exchanged messages, laughing softly with eager joy. The man said something about finally enforcing decent rules. The woman observed the gleam of the marble, gave a small smile of approval, and sat in the first chair, her posture erect, hands folded in her lap, ready to be consulted, ready to offer her opinion, ready to be heard. At 9:55 a.m., the 2 representatives from the administrator's office stood behind the small table. One of them opened the folder, took out a sheaf of documents with gold clips and a letterhead on top. The other adjusted the portable microphone and tested sound. The residents quieted their chatter. The silence settled like fine dust. Good morning, everyone, the representative began, smiling briefly. Thank you for coming down. Today's an important and positive announcement. Eyes darted like a school of fish, from the table to the door, from the door to the elevator. The couple leaned forward. The doorman discreetly straightened, as if also trying to hear clearly. The lady with the little dog whispered, "Oh my God. We inform you that there was transfer of ownership of the building, duly registered with a notary." She held up the first sheet, stamped. From today onwards, the building will be owned by the company Heritage Gold. The new controller asked to introduce yourself in person and speak briefly with the residents. A short, subdued buzz of surprise rippled through the semicircle. The couple exchanged glances and calculated smiles. The scene had lived up to their expectations. Finally, new owner. He adjusted his sleeve. She tucked her hair behind her ear, ready to extend her hand to say, "Welcome," to suggest some adjustments to the delivery policy. The automatic door slid open. A man in a well-cut suit entered, unhurried, his steps unasked for permission because he already had it. He greeted the doorman by name. This intimate and simple detail made some residents exchange glances and walked to the center of the lobby with the serenity of someone who needed nothing to prove. The manager's representative stepped forward and made an introductory gesture. Silence fell. Her eyes widened slightly. His jaw hardened. Time, for a second, moved slowly like an old elevator. The new owner of the building smiled kindly, opened the folder, showed the cover of the contract, and said, in a tone that filled everything without being loud, "Good morning. My name is..." And the entire hall recognized the face before even the name. The same one who, the night before, had been silently holding a cooler bag. The same one who had heard, "People like you shouldn't be here." The same one that was there now. Not to enter. Toto receive. The entire hall froze for a moment that felt like an eternity. The man who had entered was no longer the man in a simple uniform, with a cooler on his back and steps weary from so many deliveries. Now, before them, stood someone completely different. The same face, yes, recognizable, unmistakable, but dressed differently, enveloped in a different energy. A precisely tailored suit hugged his erect posture. His shoes shone discreetly, reflecting the marble floor. His hair was combed calmly, unhurriedly, without the sweat of rushing about. And in his eyes was something no one had seen the night before, the calm authority of someone who knows exactly where they are. The murmurs began like fireflies in the dark, popping up in different spots around the semicircle of residents. Is that him? The delivery man? It can't be. But it is. I saw it yesterday. The doorman, who had always treated him with respect, smiled, unable to hide his inner satisfaction at the sight. It was as if he carried within him a sense of justice materializing before everyone. He walked calmly, not needing to hurry his steps to dominate the space. Every second of his entrance was like a gradual revelation. The couple, seated in front, felt the impact the most. Her eyes widened, searching for logic in a seemingly impossible reality. His jaw clenched, unable to process the scene quickly. It was like watching a play whose script was changing before his eyes. The new owner greeted the management company's representatives with a firm handshake, thanked them for the introduction, and turned to the audience. His smile was calm, not triumphant. His voice, deep and well-placed, cut through the air like an effortless knife. Good morning, everyone. Many of you have seen me before, perhaps without knowing who I was. He paused, letting the words sink in. Well, today I'm here not as a delivery man, but as the new owner of this building. A collective gasp ran through the room, followed by looks of shock, disbelief, and even admiration. Some residents whispered, "I knew it was him." Others shook their heads in astonishment. The woman in 203, holding the puppy, pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to contain her surprise. He continued, "First of all, I want to make it clear. Respect is the foundation of everything I intend to maintain here. Respect among residents, employees, and visitors. This building is made of people, not just walls and rules." The phrase echoed with an invisible force. Those who had witnessed the scene the night before felt the extra weight of the words, and those who hadn't seen it sensed from the atmosphere that there was something bigger going on behind it. The couple, however, remained silent. The woman clutched her purse to her lap as if it were a shield. The man fidgeted with his fingers, trying to hide his nervousness. Both avoided looking directly at their new owner. But it was impossible to hide. Everyone knew that, the night before, they had been the protagonists of the humiliation. He didn't expose them. He didn't need to. His mere presence said it all. The contrast between the past and the present scene was enough to engrave the lesson. "I know. Change can be scary," he continued, "but I want to reassure you. My goal here is to take care of your assets and ensure everyone lives well. To that end, I rely on mutual respect as a fundamental rule." Some residents began to applaud timidly, breaking the tense silence. Others nodded in agreement. The couple, motionless, seemed petrified. The new owner made a point of closing in a simple way. "Thank you for your trust. I'll always be around, not just as your landlord, but as your neighbor." He handed the folder back to the representative, and as he turned slightly, his gaze met the couple's. There was no anger, no irony, just serenity. And precisely because of that, the weight was even greater. The entire hall understood. Life had turned around, and fate, patient as ever, had chosen the perfect stage to reveal its lesson. The air in the lobby seemed denser than it had been minutes before. The chandeliers reflected off the floor as if illuminating a historical scene, a moment impossible to erase from the building's collective memory. All eyes were fixed on him, the man who, hours ago, had been just another delivery man with a cooler bag on his back, now in a well-cut suit, speaking like the true owner of the place. The confirmation had already been given by the administrator herself, with official documents in hand.
But hearing it from his own mouth, so clearly and directly, was different. It was as if each word hammered into the minds of those present, shattering
prejudices, questioning certainties, and shattering arrogance. In the center of the seats, right in front of everyone, sat the couple. They had sat there hoping to be the protagonists of a morning of order and new rules. But now, in that privileged position, there was no escape. They were the first to feel the weight of the revelation. His wife, Donna Marina, tried to hide her initial surprise with a neutral expression, but her fingers clutched her purse against her lap, betraying her. Tension. Her husband, Mr. Augusto, had a rigid jaw, tight lips, and restless hands, drumming against the arm of the chair. They both avoided meeting his eyes, but at the same time, they couldn't help but glance at him. Their silence was as loud as any words. The new owner, however, didn't expose them directly. He didn't mention names, didn't recount the scene from the previous night. It was unnecessary. Those who had witnessed it already knew. Those who hadn't seen it could tell by the exchanged glances and the heavy atmosphere that hung around the couple. He simply continued his serene speech, treating everyone as equals. I know some of you may be wondering how someone like me got here. The answer is simple: hard work, persistence, and the belief that every effort counts. No matter the profession, no matter the uniform, we all have dignity. And that's what I want to be the foundation of this community. The words were met with timid applause at first, but they grew in volume until they formed a chorus of approval. Residents smiled, some nodded in agreement, others sighed in relief, as if an injustice had been righted before their eyes. With each clap that echoed, the couple shrank further. They were the only ones not clapping. The contrast was stark. Everyone stood, acknowledging the grandeur of the moment, while they remained seated, trapped in their own shame. The owner looked at each of those present, thanked them with a calm nod, and concluded, "This building is now my responsibility. And I guarantee that from now on, the fundamental rule will be this: respect comes first. No exceptions." The applause began again, this time firmer, more confident. Even the doorman, who normally maintained a neutral posture, let out a proud smile. The janitor, leaning against the wall, discreetly clapped too, as if celebrating a personal victory. Meanwhile, the couple finally couldn't stand the silence anymore. Marina leaned toward her husband and whispered, her lips almost pressed against his ear, "This can't be happening." Augusto, rigid, simply replied, "Shut up." But it was too late. Everyone already knew. Everyone had already seen it, and more than that, everyone already understood. That morning, the tables had turned. The delivery man who had been the target of scorn had revealed himself as the true owner, not just on paper, but in the respect of everyone present. The couple could shrink as much as they wanted. The truth was out in the open, official, irreversible. And from then on, there was no erasing the scene that would be forever etched in the memory of every resident. The room was on its feet, vibrating with applause. But in the center, in the front row, two bodies seemed petrified. Marina and Augusto couldn't keep up with the collective movement. The hands that had once applauded at parties and social gatherings now remained clasped on their knees, as if paralyzed by shame. Marina's eyes darted back and forth, searching for an escape route. She stared at the automatic door, the elevator, even the marble floor, as if there were a gap there to disappear into. But there wasn't. The hall was filled with watchful eyes, and everyone knew exactly what was happening. The fall of a pedestal erected by years of arrogance. Augusto, always so confident in his cutting words, was speechless. His clenched jaw betrayed his internal struggle. His body wanted to stand up and protest, but his mind knew there was no argument to sustain it. The weight of the revelation crushed his defenses. With each applause echoing through the room, he shrank further, as if he were being diminished in front of everyone. The voices around them didn't help. Whispers drifted through the hall like wind through trees. They were the ones who mistreated the delivery man yesterday. Look who the nobody was. Life takes its toll fast, huh? These whispers reached the couple's ears like hammer blows. Marina clutched her purse so tightly to her lap that her knuckles turned white.
Augusto ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture unlike his usual vanity. He was disarmed, stripped of the power he believed he possessed. They still tried to save their composure. Marina forced a smile, the kind that looks more like a cracked mask, and muttered to her neighbor, "What a surprise, huh? Who would have thought?" The neighbor merely raised her eyebrows and looked away, not returning the complicity. It was a silence that said it all. "Don't count on me to support your farce." Augusto cleared his throat as if he wanted to speak, but his voice wouldn't come out. The weight of the atmosphere was crushing him. He knew that if he tried, any words would sound like empty excuses. And worse, they would only expose his shame even further. The new owner wasn't looking directly at them, but his every word felt like a pointed arrow. When he spoke of respect first, no exceptions, Augusto felt his face heat up. Marina lowered her eyes, unable to maintain eye contact. With every passing second, the couple crumbled further. The social power they had flaunted in the building's hallways evaporated before everyone's eyes. They were no longer influential residents defending order, but simply two arrogant individuals exposed by their own arrogance. The neighbors who had previously tolerated their rudeness now watched them with a mixture of contempt and relief. Finally, someone had shown them they weren't untouchable. Finally, the mask had slipped. The doorman behind the counter watched silently, but within him a quiet justice vibrated. He remembered the scene from the previous night perfectly, remembered the harsh words spoken to the delivery man. Now, watching the couple being swallowed by shame was like seeing the scales of life balancing before his eyes. Marina, restless, murmured to her husband, "We need to get out of here. If we get up now, it will be worse." Augusto replied, still through gritted teeth. And so they remained, seated, immobilized, bearing the unbearable weight of the collective gaze. Their proud posture had given way to a slump. Their arrogant smile had become a broken mask. The couple who had laughed the night before now trembled in the face of reality. In that moment, they learned, albeit reluctantly, that life has a way of turning things around, and that sometimes all it takes is one night to transform humiliation into justice. The applause faded until it became a contented murmur, the kind that vibrates in the air like a warm breeze after rain. And then the small gestures began, the ones that, taken together, are worth more than any speech. The lady from 203 with the little white dog in her arms approached the new owner first. She extended her hand with elegant humility and said, without embellishment, "Thank you for reminding us of the obvious. Respect. Welcome." He shook her hand with the same care one might give a family member. The puppy sniffed the hem of his pants and wagged its tail, as if offering its opinion. On the other side, the guy from 1101, sweatshirt, sneakers, dark circles under his eyes from having worked all night, raised his thermos in a sort of shy toast. "Count on me for whatever you need, boss. If there's a group effort to fix up the playroom or paint the hallway, I'm in." "Don't call me boss, call me neighbor," the owner replied, smiling, "and thanks for your willingness." The girl from 702, the one with the urgent request from the night before, swallowed her nerves and came closer. I saw part of what happened yesterday. I wanted to tell you that you were amazing, seriously, and quietly, almost like a secret conspiracy throughout the lobby. Thank you for representing us." He nodded, not capitalizing on his gratitude. "We represent better when we represent everyone." At the counter, the doorman straightened his posture like someone wearing an invisible medal. The janitor, who rarely emerged from the shadows, approached with a folded sheet of paper, a scribbled checklist of old problems, water leaks in the garage, burned-out light bulbs in the basement, a loose screw in the service door hinge. The new owner took the paper like someone receiving a treasure map. "Let's resolve this in order of urgency, okay?" He looked them both in the eye. "You're the face of the house. If anyone disrespects you, call me." That "call me" spun through the air and found places to land. Neighbors who had previously spoken quietly in the hallway now ventured whispered comments, as if testing a newly gained freedom. Finally, someone who sees employees as people. That changes everything. The building has an owner, but the house belongs to everyone. A small contingent of residents formed a spontaneous line to introduce themselves, offer help, and suggest improvements. Among them, the most symbolic. "We need a code of conduct that protects the work of those who enter the building," said the teacher from 404. The doorman, the cleaners, the delivery people, the maintenance staff. "I agree," he replied. "Clear rules, simple language, and a non-negotiable principle. No one humiliates anyone." Near the first row of seats, the tension had a different texture. Marina and Augusto remained seated, cornered not by security guards, no one needed that, but by the evidence that they had lost something that would never return, the complacency of their neighbors. A woman who used to chat with Marina about shade flowers merely inclined her head and continued on, without the usual pause. The young couple from 601, who always smiled at Augusto in the elevator, walked straight past. There was no rudeness, only disaffiliation. The invisible cord that connected them to the rest of the building, out of convenience, had been severed out of conviction. The condominium's WhatsApp group was beeping in their pockets, and the notifications were mirroring the lobby. Beautiful speech. "I'm so proud of the building. We need to support the doorman and the janitor. I suggest a sign in the lobby. Delivery drivers are welcome. Treat them with respect." Someone typed, "And who disrespects?" Another person replied, "Register and communicate with the administration. No show, with consequences." The word consequence landed like a heavy book on a crooked shelf. It straightened up. The new owner walked over to the administrator's desk, signed 2 copies of an addendum. "Revision of internal regulations," the heading read, and handed the sheets back with a gesture that didn't call for fanfare. "We'll release a draft within 7 days. First, I want to hear from those who keep the building standing," he said, gesturing toward the employees. "Then we'll hear from all the residents. The order is deliberately reversed. Whoever usually speaks last will speak first." The phrase drew a murmur of heartfelt approval. Democracy applied to the condominium. Simple, radical in context. The lady from 203 returned only to say, "I've been waiting for this for a long time." A neighbor known for his long texts in meetings tried a vanity ride. "I've always defended this here." But vanity lost steam when it encountered an environment where the focus wasn't on one's own voice, but rather on what was being built together. The new owner didn't fight for a platform. He offered invisible microphones. Then something small but decisive happened. A motorcycle courier pulled up to the door with a red backpack on his back, unaware that he was about to enter the scene. He looked at the doorman awkwardly. "It's delivery to 305, social or service." The doorman looked, almost asking permission from the past, and the new owner answered before any old habit could cross the door. "Wherever is quickest and safest for you and everyone else." And he added, looking around the lobby, "The right path is the one of respect." The delivery man nodded in thanks, crossed as if treading on neutral ground, and no one frowned. No one frowned. On the contrary, a neighbor held the automatic door for him, and the janitor pointed to the elevator that had just been cleared by maintenance. The joint gesture reshaped the emotional blueprint of the building, before and after. In the corner, a low dialogue reinforced the new contour. "Did you see their faces?" someone whispered, referring to the couple. "I saw, but the best answer already came." And he pointed to the delivery boy who disappeared into the elevator as if pointing to a horizon. The administrator formally concluded the brief session. The lobby dispersed in waves, and as the neighbors ascended, a silent consensus remained. The building had chosen a side, not that of noisy punishment, but that of a culture that takes hold and, once established, refuses to be kicked back into the street. When almost everyone had gone upstairs, Marina risked standing up. "I was going to say something to the new owner, perhaps a contrived excuse, perhaps a justification." She swallowed her words. When she realized there was no audience for the performance. The important request needed no framework. It needed truth. Augusto, pale, simply shrugged and stared at the polished floor, which, for the first time, gave him a lesser reflection. The doorman closed the entry in the blue-covered notebook. Introduction of the new owner. Meeting without disturbance. Guideline. Respect. He closed the notebook with a sigh that felt like rest, and the new owner, before going upstairs to check on a leak in the second basement, glanced again at the now quiet lobby. The marble, the mirrors, the plants, all the same. And yet everything was different. The house was in the same coordinates, but in a different time. One where the community, finally, had memories. Upstairs, doors closed with the usual sounds of everyday life. But everyday life in that building would never be ordinary again. When silence returned to the lobby, it seemed as if nothing had changed. The chandeliers continued to shine. The marble reflected footsteps. The doorman resumed his rounds of mail, and the building's life returned to its normal routine. But inside each person who witnessed that morning, something was no longer the same. It was as if everyone had received a reminder inscribed in iron. Respect is not a luxury, not a choice. It is a foundation. The new owner didn't make a long speech, didn't raise his voice, didn't seek revenge. He simply showed with presence and serenity that life takes turns, and when it does, it doesn't consult a calendar. Yesterday he was carrying a cooler bag, treated as if invisible. Today, in a well-cut suit, he was the legal guardian of the same space where he'd been humiliated. What changed, after all? It wasn't him. It was the gaze of everyone else, confronted with the truth they'd avoided seeing. Dignity doesn't depend on position, clothing, or status. The couple, once accustomed to dictating rules and imposing arrogance in the hallways, now walked through the building with short steps and lowered shoulders. There was no need for scandal, public expulsion, or shouting. Silent shame was enough. The community, united in an invisible pact, had already spoken. The collective judgment needed no courtroom. It was delivered in eyes that no longer bore complicity. Some residents went up to their apartments to reflect on small, everyday actions. The woman who used to ignore the doorman promised herself she'd never again pass by without greeting him. The guy from 1101, inspired, wrote in the group, "Respect starts with good morning, let's remember that." Even the girl from 702, when telling her mother what she witnessed, repeated out loud, "It doesn't matter if the person is a delivery person or an owner. Everyone deserves respect." Ultimately, this was the great lesson. The world doesn't ask for permission to turn things around. Those who humiliate today may need it tomorrow. Those who despise may discover they've despised the wrong person. And those who remain calm, even in the face of injustice, ultimately show that true strength lies not in shouting, but in dignity. The new owner went upstairs later to check for a leak in the basement. He walked with the same calm as always, greeting employees by name, listening to their complaints attentively. He didn't need a platform, because the greatest lesson had already been taught in the silence of his demeanor. He wasn't worried about the couple specifically. He knew life would take care of them, and it already was. His commitment was greater, to transform that building into a space where no one would feel invisible anymore. That night, each resident lay in bed carrying a reflection, some in pride, some in shame, but all in awareness. The building looked the same, but it was permeated by a new truth. Respect is the only rule that supports all others. The couple was slow to fall asleep. Augusto stared at the ceiling, replaying every word spoken the night before. Marina was fiddling with her phone, reading messages circulating in the groups. Neither of them dared say it out loud, but they both knew. They had been exposed, not by the owner, but by their own arrogance. And that mark wouldn't be easily erased. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Horns, sirens, hurried voices. But in that particular building, a story had already become a collective memory. The hallways and lobby would forever hold the memory of a couple who once snubbed a food delivery driver, and the next day discovered he was the new owner of their building. And when this story was told, and it certainly would be, it wouldn't matter how many details were lost. What would remain would always be the simple, unbreakable moral: no one is above respect.